In the game development space, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Mistakes, glitches, bugs. It will happen from time to time. But as an indie game developer, what are the top 5 mistakes that happen? Today, we're going to be going over that in today's podcast episode of Let's Talk and Read in the Yuki, and talk about how to mitigate from those mistakes. And today, I would also like to direct your attention to tomorrow, as we're going to be having a live podcast for the first time, talking about what we have learned this week about indie game development. And more on that during this episode. Today's article is top 5 mistakes made by indie game developers, and it is made in Flow Lab. And let's take a look at this article. If you would like the show notes are provided in the link in the description below on my Google Drive. So, top 5 mistakes made by indie game developers. This was written back in October 29, 2021, and here we go. Anyone can jot down a list of game development mistakes. Why would you listen to me? That's a fair question. As a seasoned mistake maker, let me try to back up my authority in this particular area a bit. To start, I've been a professional game developer in quotation marks since about 2007, and yet have somehow never released a hit game. In fact, even though I've been involved with dozens of game projects over the years, though some even for major studios, it's very unlikely that you ever heard of, let alone played any of them. Many of them were terrible and doomed from the start. For example, I once went to E3 as a programmer for a game so disastrous that I wore my badge backwards the whole time, so none could tell what boot I was from. Or there was a game for an RC toy car company that strictly forbade any racing, or a hockey themed MMO that contained no actual hockey. So here is that meme, and here we go. So although I probably shouldn't be writing any how to succeed at game development articles yet, I feel I've gotten the mistakes angle well and truly covered. Many of these I've seen being made over and over by developers, so hopefully by calling attention to them, we can prevent others from learning the hard way. So let's have a look at the first mistake, which is game is too big and complex. And this happens a lot in the gaming development space. Number one, it's because it's very common and very hazardous. Now, if you're talking about a AAA company, they don't have a problem with this. But for indie developers, this is a big mistake. This is especially true for your first game. For most people just getting into game development, they have lots of big plans about what types of games they would like to make. Grand ideas can be great, but once you have a bit of experience, but they can spell disaster when trying to get your first game completed. Okay? And there's a rule called the 90-90 rule. And here's what it says. The first 90% of the game accounts for the first 90% of development time. The remaining 10% of the game accounts for the other 90% of development time. That is according to Tom Gregor from Bell Labs, and this was paraphrased from him. So, simplifying the game is very important. If you're working on your first game right now, think about ways you can simplify things. Reduce the amount of required content and get it finished more quickly. The more you add to the game, the more complex and big it gets. For example, let's say you're doing a Pokemon game. Again, that is from Nintendo, but let's just say there's somebody out there who wants to make a Pokemon game. You don't want to add all of a sudden a new mechanic and then it gets so big that you cannot finish it. So try to simplify the mechanic and the level that you want to use that mechanic in when it comes to game development. This loop is very familiar, and it's called the loop of restarting. And that is mistake number 2. Mistake number 2, the loop of restarting. This mistake has also been dubbed the one of the game development dead loops by Derek Yu. Developers beware, it's easier than you think to fall into this trap, especially as you're first learning. So this loop says, get a new idea, then start the new project. Then tell everyone, but you may have noticed that there's something missing. There is no arrow going left to finish project. There is an arrow going left and up, then back to get a new idea. And it keeps going on. This project here, this idea, is never going to be finished, as you can see. The loop of restarting happens as their skills are improving during development. Sometimes your art skills will improve significantly as the game progresses, making it appear that the earlier portions of the game are no longer good enough. Other times, your programming skills will improve, or you think of new mechanics that will require you to go back and rework earlier finished levels. And this happens all the time. You start to learn about game development one day, and then all of a sudden you learn a new mechanic that you can want to add to said game, and then like 2 months later you want to add another mechanic that you learn about adding, then you want to learn another mechanic you want to learn that in, and then you want to add those mechanics into the levels you already finished. So by the time you add all those mechanics on the levels you already finished, it's going to be broken. And the reason why is because you have to test your new mechanics and adjust your old mechanics. And if one of them breaks the game, that's it. You're restarting from scratch. Okay? And as you can see here in the next paragraph, in either case, the danger is the same. You feel compelled to return to the beginning and make major changes to already previous work. In the worst case scenario, this can mean completely starting over. The problem is even once the game is restarted, your skills continue to improve over time and the desire to rework previous areas continues. So that's the cycle, that's explaining this cycle right here. You get a new idea for the game, you start a new project though, then you tell everyone about this said new project, and then you got another new idea, and then you keep going. You never finish it because you have so many ideas that you want to bring into the game that you never finish said game. Sometimes games can get stuck in the cycle for years, and many games have been derailed or killed by constant development restarts. To avoid stumbling into this particular pitfall, make sure you focus on finishing and remembering that there's always a next game, and that's correct. Remember, if a mechanic works for game 1, keep it for game 1. If you like a mechanic that you've been developing for the last few months and you want to test it, try making a new project and calling it like a test project for your second mechanic. If you like it, but you want to make sure you avoid going back to reworking a level, save this new mechanic for a second game. It's that simple. Or at the very end of game 1, you might have opened like a bonus area, like a secret area in the level, and you found a secret weapon that nobody knows about yet, but it's a preview of the second game. This new mechanic you can test out in game 1, and then players are looking forward to something new in game 2. That's how I would approach that in terms of like not falling into this loop here. Lack of playtesting is mistake number 3. And actually I want to go off a little bit of a tangent in a moment, and we're going to go back into that why in just a moment. The longer you spend on working your game, the more familiar that quirks you become, and the less ability you have to view your game from a new player's perspective. That is correct. Okay? This is right. Because here's the thing. Once you develop your game and you publish your game, you do not have any control. You no longer have the control in terms of like how you view your game. Because for one, you might have a very good viewing of how your game runs. However, once you get into that publishing stage, and we, the regular people, get to play your game as the consumers, we have our own looks into the game. This is what you call the player's new perspective, a new player's perspective. Because I'm going to play your game very differently than how you play your game. Then player two, my buddy here, or imaginary buddy in this case, is going to play your game. He's going to have a different perspective than I do. So I have a different perspective. My buddy has a different perspective. You have a different perspective as a developer. So once you publish the game, you lose the ability to have control. And now the control goes to the consumers. Will they view the game the same way as you, as a developer? That's what you have to think about. How are they going to respond when it comes to the game? It's crucial to have other people play your game as early and as often as possible. In the best case scenario, you should watch people play in an environment where you can observe them directly. Remember not to talk when doing this. Resist the urge to give explanations and hints. Okay, so this one is where sometimes game developers often invite people to playtest their game in like a area. Let's say that we're in Los Angeles right now, and I've been invited to a game playtest. Usually they would invite their content creators and all that good stuff to a special area in LA where you can test the game. Sometimes they would have NDA, sometimes they won't, but their job is to see you playtest the game. Okay? But their job is also not to give you a hint. Not to give hints, not to give explanations as a developer. Their goal is to observe to see how they can improve their game based on the consensus of what they're viewing from the playtesters. So, and playtesting, by the way, is actually a job. That's actually a job you can apply for, believe it or not. Okay? So if you're looking into playtesting as a career, then this is the portion that you need to read in terms of like playtester. Also, I do want to go off this little tangent about playing your game as early as possible, because on Steam you can do something called early access. And I would like to bring your attention to a game that I'm currently getting ready to review, and that is called Tape to Tape. In short, Tape to Tape is a hockey roguelike game that allows you to play the hockey but with power-ups. So that's a little bit of a game. If you guys want me to, I'm going to review this game for you guys very soon here. But in terms of like early access, like you want them to play your game while it's in active development. Right now, this game is already out. This game was released May 3rd, 2023. So what is upcoming for the early access? Upcoming features according to Tape to Tape is manual goalies, fighting, players and teams, crowd pledgers, customization and localization, including not limited to goaltender power-ups, outdoor rink, additions to campaign, events, nodes, etc. Quality of life improvements, including sound effects, VFX, and UI polishing. Community feedback is very important. Sliding shot blocking, additional story, dialogues, new goal celebrations. They're also learning about long-term ideas like online multiplayer, additional game modes, franchise mode, GM, draft mode, Zamboni mini game, additional game rules, voiceover, and curl to curl. However, one of their things is not to do the following: pay to win, microtransactions, loot gotcha, mobile, and commentators. Mobile is mobile games on the phone. So they're not interested in the mobile market, but they're also not going to be doing pay to win, no microtransactions, and no loot boxes, which is a very good thing. We were going to talk about this more next week when we talk about the business of indie gaming. So look out for like business material and big data next week when we talk about the podcast. So as you can see here, the game is already out, but there's future development ideas in the works. And this is how people can playtest everything even while the game is in active development. Okay? So this is a very good idea to make it early access. Okay? Okay, now let's head back to the article and off my tangent. Playing testing like this is the best way to find out which parts of the games are confusing, frustrating, and what are fun. I will tell you, tape to tape is a lot of fun. You just have to figure out what part is the fun part. Mistake number 4 is wrong genre or platform. So a lot of games nowadays are coming out for the mobile phone and the Steam. But why is making the wrong genre or platform very detrimental? It's the more of later on in development. Your first game, whatever. Your second game, okay. But when you get to the third game or fourth game you want to publish, this is where you have to take this seriously. Okay? It's when you want to distribute your games to a larger audience or sell them. Then it makes sense to think carefully about your intended genre, theme, and platform and how they fit well together. Most platforms and marketplaces have certain game types that excel there and those who are almost destined to fail. For example, mobile devices have very specific input styles that make some game styles and genres impossible to do well. Some marketplaces like Steam, for example, have certain genres and themes that do especially well with their audience, and others that seem to get ignored. Trying to build a game that doesn't match well with the intended platform and audience is a losing proposition. Genres, themes, and platforms are fluid and constantly changing. So there's no solid rules here. You'll need to do some relevant research when it comes to a specific game. I would like now to present a little something that we're going to be doing next week. Okay? So next week we're going to be talking about in the podcast about sales numbers, charts, and sales numbers and big data. And I would like to present to you one of the platforms that we're going to be taking a look at, and that is called VG Insights. And you can check this out at vginsights.com. And what they let you do is any game on Steam, it will allow you to present some sales numbers. For example, Rust here, it's not a indie game, but I do want to present. Oh, it is an indie game, excuse me, as you can see here. But I do want to present how you can read this. So as you can see, I'm gonna give you guys more of a episode for this next week when we talk about more big data when it comes to indie games and sales numbers. And you'll actually see this a little bit tomorrow when we do our live podcast. So if you guys are interested in more of this when we do big data, that will be next week, and a little small sample tomorrow as well. So if we take a look at VG Insights, if we take a look at Steam Analytics in terms of like genre analytics. So as you can see here, genre analytics, this tool shows which genres and subgenres are in high demand and which are oversupplied. It's a great start for an indie developer trying to understand which subgenres their games should focus on. So let's take a look at some of the data that's coming in from the last week. And this is to supply the number 4 mistake, about the wrong genre or publisher. So as you can see here on the Steam store in terms of revenue, the most one is going to be for role-playing games, regardless of what type. So for example, role-playing games, the median revenue or the average revenue is $5,670. Okay, that's revenue talk. Massively multiplayer online games like this one, MMO, is $4,989 in terms of revenue. Median revenue, that is. Simulation games like The Sims, Goat Simulator, all that, $4,777. What is at the bottom, you know, for this week or for this period? Casual games, racing games, and sports games. They don't make as much money in terms of the revenue, in terms of the median revenue. Casual is ranked last at $1,431 on average in terms of revenue. Now let's take a look at another topic, and that is price. The price of games on Steam according to genre. The top 5 are sports, MMO, simulation, and RPG. The top 4, excuse me. Role-playing games was number 1 when it comes to median revenue, but number 4 when it comes to the average price. The average price of an indie game in the role-playing category is $11.32. That means some games can be $20, some games can be $30, some games can be $10, and some games can be even as low as 99 cents. Okay, sports titles though tend to be more at $12.26. Okay, so if you guys want more of an insight into like this the VG insights, I'm going to have more on this next week when we talk about sales figures. We're going to be taking a look at big data next week. So lots to look forward to Monday to Friday. I have an episode, I think, almost every day, except for the weekend. Okay, except for our live streams on the weekend. So we're trying this out, y'all. We're going back to the article. We are not officially done yet, because we do need to talk about money. Marketing procrastination is actually the 5th mistake. Okay, here we go. Again, first game, yeah, you don't really need to market it that much because it's not really, you're learning the ropes on your first 2 games. However, once you get to the 3rd game you want to market, this is where you got to take this seriously, especially nowadays. It is very common for a developer to spend months or even years building and polishing their game, and then when it's ready, decide to start building an audience. This is a huge mistake because there's loads of games released every week, and it's very difficult to stand out in the crowd. Like I mentioned, Afro mentioned earlier about early access. This is why a lot of games nowadays on Steam is being early accessed. And it's because, yes, the game is out, but it's not the definitive final game. But they're building that audience to get it ready for the definitive release. Look at Tape to Tape. Tape to Tape is a indie game that is also in the early access category, as you can see here, because they have a roadmap. This roadmap indicates of what they're planning to add in the next couple of months or years to come. For example, aforementioned online multiplayer has been one of the features possible long term. So with that being said, how is the marketing going to be in play? The marketing is already there. You know why? Because the game is already out. The only thing is they're working on developing even more, adding updates, adding patches if needed. So the more you market your game out there, the more people are going to remember said game, and the more audience you're going to start to build. And here's more. There's even more. Tape to Tape has a Twitter reference. Not reference, but Twitter presence. So if we take a look at the game right now, oops, excuse me. If we take a look at Tape to Tape right now, as you can see, they have a Discord, they have a Twitter, they even have a YouTube. And marketing on YouTube, well, you're technically like free marketing in this case, because you can upload to YouTube. You can actually see how the game looks like, and you can make content for it, like I did recently when I did a live stream of this game a few days ago. So technically speaking, I'm part of the early access because I've got the game, I bought the game, and I'm presenting the game to you guys during my live streams one of these days. And if you take a look at their YouTube channel, oops, probably they don't have it right now, but we'll see. Their Twitter for sure. Here we go. Here's the tape. Here's the Twitter. Here's the Twitter based on the Tape to Tape game, and it's in early access. And here's how the game looks. Look at how much people are looking into Mr. Tape to Tape here. Look at how much content is being made, and I'm gonna actually make more content for this, including a game review very soon. Look at this. Look at what this says. 7 days before EA launch, goalies are still in shape to rob goals. Rip headphones users, you have been warned. Yep. Look at that. It's funny. There's 13 seconds left on the clock. And look at that. That was robbery. That was robbed of a goal right there. But you see how the market is. Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all that. And early access. Sign me up. Sign me up. Okay? That's how that works. Now, here's the deal. They're doing, the Tape to Tape is doing marketing very well. Here's where the problem is, the mistake. The time to begin marketing and building an audience for your game is the moment that you have something to share. Screenshots, devlogs, updates, level walkthroughs, player polls, or any game related content that you can help build an audience with that feels invested in the game's success. Look at how Tape to Tape is doing it. You already have a hashtag, you have a Twitter already, potential YouTube, content creators like myself, and other people who are looking into a game like that. They already had screenshots to share. They already had moments to play with. They even had development logs. The moment that they started their early access campaign was the moment they started marketing your game, the game. The later you market your game, the less likely people are going to remember the game. For example, if you start marketing your game within the first 10% of building your game, bam, right there. That's when you start your marketing, because by the time the game gets to 25%, then, oh, you have something to share? Share it. Oh, 35%, share it. 50%, share it. 75%, share it. 95%, share it. When it's finished, share it again. The reason why, the more you share it, and the more you give updates, and the more that you communicate with your audience, the better your game is going to have in terms of the revenue. Revenue and reception. Because they're going to remember this particular game of yours that you're developing. And if they do that, the more you do that, the more positive reception you're going to get. Okay? And they said, oh, by the way, don't start your marketing when you're 10% away from making the game happen, because that is far too late. And speaking of far too late, this process takes time. However, launch week is far too late to start marketing. Get started marketing your game as soon as you can and stay consistent in order to have players ready to jump into the game as soon as it is ready. Okay? That's why on Steam in particular, you have this button. Well, I don't have the button, but because I'm not signed in, but you have the wish list button. You have the wish list button. You have the follow button. You have the ignore button. You have all those buttons that tell the developer, hey, I'm interested in your game, sir or ma'am. I cannot wait for the future updates, and I'm excited to play your game. So that tells the developer the feedback right away. They're excited. But if you're putting this out there within 10% remaining of your development time, and your game comes out like 2 days later, you're far too late, because you have quick hype. It's called a shadow drop. There is one very particular exception to this rule, however, and that is a game that recently launched this year, and that is called Hi-Fi Rush. Hi-Fi Rush was the exception to this rule because the game was shadow dropped. And normally shadow drop games don't do well because their marketing, and this game had no marketing whatsoever. And it came out in the the marketing campaign started in the last 10 or 5%. But look at the reviews. Overwhelmingly positive at 651, and this is an indie game. Okay? An indie game, okay? Let me show you that. I actually played this live on the main channel too. And I might play it again because of the indie game podcast. But as you can see, there's a lot in here that you can get, and it's only $30, by the way. And the game is fantastic. And if we take a look at our upcoming data, big data, if we look for a Hi-Fi Rush, let me see if it actually understands the game. There it is. If we look at Hi-Fi Rush, in the last 6 months as of today, 198 active players, 262 is the active players count, 97.7% positive reviews, and it's already grossing or revenue of $10.9 million. And this release January 24 of this year, by the way, at $30. Right now there's a discount, 1%. This, according to the thing here, it's cartoony, it's action, it's a rhythm game, all that good stuff. Okay? And if we look at the big data here, if we look at what they sold, the units sold is about 457,000, 457,740, around there. And if we take a look at the rating, it's up and down, but it's not up and down too much. The lowest it has been is 97.7% positive, and that's not bad at all. That's the lowest according to this particular last 7 days. But that's not bad. It's just that 97.7 was the bottom of this period. And if we take a look at the number of positive reviews, 977 is 97 out of 91,000, 548 up to of the games. That is one in the top 1% of games in the positive area. Right now, the gross revenue in terms of lifetime, it's in rank number 802 out of 91,548 games out there. They're in the top 0.9%. Okay? That is extremely exceptional, very well, for a game that was shadow dropped on January 24 of this year. So what does this mean to show you in terms of marketing? In terms of that last point, this game was the exception. Hi-Fi Rush was the exception to the rule. And no wonder why it's not an indie game though, because it's by Bethesda and they're a AAA company. But the reason why I wanted to show this off is because of the marketing in terms of like the how long did they have to wait. Hi-Fi Rush took the last minute. They didn't have any marketing, and they still made over 10 million. Um, a game like Tape to Tape had a lot of marketing, and it's still doing good. 372,000. It's not as much as million, but hey, you have a good game here. The marketing went well, and 25,860 units sold is not bad. Okay, so that is the idea of marketing. This process takes time, however. Like I said earlier, Hi-Fi Rush got away with it because it's a good game. Had it not been a good game, and we didn't even know about this game until last minute. Had it not been a good game, though, then we would be talking about a different story. Okay? And that is the story of the top 5 mistakes of indie games. In depth, of course, on my podcast. If you learned something new today, make sure you guys hit that like, hit that share, hit the subscribe button. And tomorrow we're going to have our live podcast where we talk about the recap of what we learned this week. And next week, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be going to big data. We're going into the data. We're going to go into money. We're going to talk about revenue. We're talking about microtransactions next week. So a lot to look forward to for next week. Okay, and tomorrow for the live podcast. If you have any questions during the live podcast, make sure you guys leave them in during the live podcast tomorrow, so I can try my best to answer as much as I can based on my research over the last 2 weeks and based on the upcoming episodes. If you have a question about an upcoming topic like microtransactions, I'll still be able to answer as much as I can, but we're going to go over everything in terms of next week's presentations little next week. This is a little preview for you guys. So make sure you guys hit that like, hit that share, subscribe to below. And of course, as always, don't forget to live on the indie gaming side of life.